Note the disclaimer. Before I make a start to this video, I'd like to bring a special guest on who will be joining me in producing Sins here. All rise for the Honourable Luke Doherty.
Hello everyone, how you doing? I'm happy to be invited into this video and I'm also excited to work on it with Cheese.
Lovely to have you here, mate. And with that covered, court is now in session.
Lenny, what are you doing?
What? I was just, picking you some flowers.
Sharkterfuge!
Well, clearly it didn't work since Frankie swatted the flowers out of Lenny's hand right after.
Ugh, that song gives me the creeps.
What do you mean? It's our theme song.
The movie Jaws existing in this movie's universe isn't a stretch, but thinking that Frankie and Lenny would have access to actually watch the movie is. And yeah, we're gonna find out all these fish have the same things humans have, but underwater, but since all that's bullshit as well, my sin stands.
But you just answered yourself. This is a world where the sea creatures have the same things that humans have in the real world, so shouldn't that be an answer to you as to how Frankie and Lenny have been able to watch Jaws?
Apparently lots of fish are assholes and do eat other fish, so I guess the sin is not naming this restaurant Apple King.
Great name for an orchard, not for a fish food restaurant.
How would all these signs exist underwater? How would they even be designed underwater? What fish has the hands to write, paint, or draw? How would the printing equipment work underwater? How does a fish drink Coke? And your answer for all these questions could be, it's an animated film, and then I'll kindly ask you to f*** off, and then gladly welcome you to the channel for the first time. Hope you stay a while, and meanwhile, I will add 10 sins for all this underwater advertising nonsense.
But that's literally the answer here. This is an animated film, and those kinds of movies are supposed to be unrealistic and not taken seriously.
Also, Jeremy pads the sin count cliche.
Are they gone? Are they gone?
If they're not, Katie Current almost got you killed for the sole purpose of setting up this fish reveal.
Sorry, gonna have to do this in my native tongue. Tracy Finshaw would have been under the assumption the cameras were off until the sharks had disappeared.
I'm not sure why that seal needed to kill that starfish, or why both these tiles say Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, if it had been Lawrence Fishburne, it would make sense. He totally deserves 2 stars, but Lawrence Fishburne, he can go eat carp for all I care.
Sinning Lawrence Fishburne, technically.
Slight congestion here on the Inner Reef 95.
Production team thought a 4-way intersection with a traffic light was the best way to draw a comparison to Interstate 95. And I can assure such things do not exist on that particular highway. Well, at least not on any of the parts that matter.
Okay, let's just get this out of the way here. This isn't our reality.
Also, why are we even pretending they're fish if they can't even do basic fish things like swimming up, over, and around other fish?
They're supposed to act like cars here. And excluding monster trucks, when was the last time you saw a car driving over another series of cars?
Movie confirms what I have long suspected, that eels are the most sexually exciting aquatic creatures.
We'd prefer not to hear that. And I think your wife would have questions if you slithered home with an eel dangling from you.
How exactly are the prices listed next to the sushi rolls being paid? Do the fish have cash? Where do they keep it?
Yes, the fish do have cash, and the part where Oscar goes to the seahorse race to give Mr. Sykes the money he owes him is proof of that. And while there's no definite answer on where they keep the cash, I'd assume that the fish likely have wallets.
Is there no hero among us?
Fishtopia has decided that the best response to the ongoing threat of an apex predator is to rely on the emergence of a hero, instead of establishing a standing army.
And what is a fish army going to do against a shark mafia? They'll be devoured faster than you can say lobster roll.
Hey, Oscar, look who came to visit.
The Flash? Because that's the only individual who could have spray-painted all this in the time Oscar swam down to have a couple words with Crazy Joe.
Jeremy, DC Comics called. They want their superhero back.
As if whales don't have enough problems, there also seems to be a lobby in Hollywood pushing for them to be treated as transportation in animated films. I'm looking at you, Surf's Up.
Jeez, don't let him see Free Willy then.
We wouldn't dare play the music, but after Luca moves the needle, Baby Got Back begins playing, and I'm sure all those 4-year-old Sir Mix-a-Lot fans were loving life.
From now on, yous work for Frankie and Lenny. Capiche?
Lenny? Frankie, I understand, but Lenny? You can't be serious.
Man, what a get to have Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese cracking wise with each other in an animated film. I bet all those 4-year-old Goodfellas fans were loving life.
I'm pretty sure these jokes were meant for the adults in the audience.
Exactly, and the kids that are watching this movie won't be getting that joke until they get older.
Tell you what's what, and what?
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 This what's on for all the who, when, where, and how.
But why?
Wait, Pop. Lenny had an accident.
Wait, are you telling me the fish have actual bathrooms down here? I mean, I don't want to see that, but I kind of do. But I don't, but I kind of do.
Oh no.
To the awkward arousal of parents everywhere, a movie shamelessly inserts itself into the Titanic cinematic universe.
Well, since that doesn't exist, that sin is overruled.
Just give me some time, that's all I'm asking. I'm begging you, Sykes, please.
So Hank, boss says we gotta come up with the next animated movie for the company, and I'm scratching my head trying to figure out what the kids want these days. Not sure of any, but can I borrow $1,000? I owe my loan shark. That's it, Hank, you nailed it. Kids love movies about loan sharks, but what if we made the loan shark an actual shark? Brilliant, Vinny. So, about that 1,000.
Nice improv, but this joke is for the adults who grew up on films like The Godfather, Scarface, and Goodfellas.
Hanging clothes out to dry underwater.
Pointing things out on the screen.
This handing over the business is for you. It's for both of yous.
Now we've got a crime boss wants to make sure his sons are up to the task of handling the business after he passes on cliche. Seriously, who is this movie for? Because it's not for kids.
But just because a movie is animated doesn't mean that it's specifically for kids, and this movie is a family movie. Additionally, I have seen animated movies that aren't aimed towards kids, such as The Prince of Egypt, The Simpsons movie, Isle of Dogs, Waltz with Bashir, Anomalisa, and Mary and Max.
You're a good person.
Personhood is generally reserved for humans, so I'd say he's a shark, son.
Except that doesn't work, since all these marine animals communicate, act, and embody human characteristics. Meaning a person in their eyes would be similar to if we ran into someone on the street.
I was forced to suspend disbelief on these seahorses galloping like real horses. That was until writers included this line.
Who in the halibut trips underwater? And by the way, on what?
And admitted that none of this makes any sense.
So, a meta joke forced you out of your suspension of disbelief? Well, that just sounds like a you problem. Meaning I'll have to borrow Luke's award again.
Ah, looks like you're stepping into the same boat as Captain Vader back when he did his Onward video.
Sorry, mate. Had to be done.
It's not so much that this animated movie has a violent death scene, as it is that the movie immediately treats it as a joke.
But the movie doesn't treat Frankie's death as a joke. It sets it up as the main thing that drives the story, since it's what leads to Oscar's line that he killed Frankie in order to become a famous somebody.
Also, missing a full stop there.
I'm so cold. That's just because we're cold-blooded.
But you're not. There are 4 types of sharks that are warm-blooded, and the Great White is one of those 4.
Well, look who did his research. Good on ya. 1 sin off.
Oscar! Did you kill that shark?
Movie wants us to believe that Ernie and Bernie believe that Oscar killed a shark, and that is a bullshit foundation to build your movie on.
Well, in case you missed it, Jeremy, which it seems you may have, Ernie and Bernie already swam away in fear when Lenny approached. And by the time they heard the crash of the anchor and saw the plume of dust, they were miles out. They also didn't see the anchor because Lenny bit it off and tossed it away, and when they were close enough to see the carnage, they saw Oscar practicing mock martial arts moves around Frankie's corpse.
Oscar, Katie Couric.
So in this world, does Katie Couric just not exist, or did Katie Couric create her on-air name after watching the Today Show? Or do both Katie Couric and Katie Couric coincidentally exist within the same universe? Regardless of the answer, I now hate everything and everyone.
Now? Huh. Weird. Anyway, this is just a voice cameo, so don't look too deep into it. Just like with Sal Masekela, Kelly Slater, and Rob Machado from Surf's Up. And if you're wondering why I said Tracy Finshaw for the first sin involving Katie Couric, it's because in the Australian version of the movie, former journalist and TV presenter Tracy Grimshaw voices the character instead of Katie Couric. Similarly with Fiona Phillips in the UK release.
Funeral scene does not contain black umbrellas. And if it was a funeral with black umbrellas cliche, would we still sin it? Yes! Yes, we would!
So, since this movie didn't show the sharks having black umbrellas at Frankie's funeral, shouldn't it be a good thing that it did something different?
How about that Titanic song?
Making jokes about a 1997 Celine Dion hit in 2004. I look forward to all the return of the Mac jokes that are sure to come later.
But that doesn't happen, so why is this a sin?
Why does this one area of the ocean have so many goddamn magazine options?
Are you sinning realism again?
Also, what story could Oscar have told to make anyone believe he had killed a shark? Movie cheats by only showing him tell part of the story. And furthermore, that anchor Lenny snapped the chain off of couldn't have gone too far. Bernie and Ernie should have seen that when they saw Oscar with the dead shark.
Agreed, they should have, but then we wouldn't have a movie. Besides, the film shows us that Bernie and Ernie aren't exactly clever or observant.
My grandmother's pearl.
Angie acts like this couldn't be a romantic gesture, but this severely unreliable character not only returned your family heirloom, but had it strung to a complete necklace. Sure, it's not a romantic gesture because of the story, but it sure as would be if the writer spent more time making the character's emotions realistic and less time worrying about the digital model of Times Square.
Making the character's emotions more realistic? Dude, Angie has been hiding her crush on Oscar since the beginning of the movie. and has always hoped he would make the first move, until realising she was a part of the life that he hated living in, and tried to be included in the somebody life before being driven away.
And her being driven away in Oscar's somebody life is what gets her to admit to him that she had feelings for him and liked him back when he was a nobody. And that's what begins Oscar's arc on reflecting on what he's done and deciding to both tell the truth and tell Angie how he truly feels about her after he dumps Lola.
Now, I don't forget anything, and I never forget who my friends are.
But you seem to have forgotten how you almost screwed everything up by taking the $5,000 Angie was nice enough to loan you and betted on a 200-to-1 odds seahorse in a race. We are supposed to be rooting for Oscar, right?
First off, he didn't take her money. She gave him the pearl to pawn off for the $5,000. Secondly, he's just now paying her back with a little extra as an apology for it taking so long to get it back to her. Thirdly, yes, Oscar isn't exactly a good guy right at this moment, but he learns his lesson by the end. Like I brought up during Cars, The Muppet Christmas Carol, Inside Out, and Toy Story. Wow, a lot of Pixar there.
Y'all kids got some skills.
They sure do. They've invented spray paint that can create art underwater. They should be the rich assholes living in the penthouse.
But, like you said earlier, this is a world where the sea creatures have the same things as humans, so wouldn't that be an explanation as to why the spray paint works here?
And if, God forbid, someone should, I don't know, find out the truth about the Sharkslayer on my way back.
The movie acts like this is just a threat to expose Oscar, but since the other fish are so scared of sharks that they are probably not going to stop and chat with Lenny, this is actually a threat to tell the other sharks, who will in turn head to the reef for lunch and encounter the fish who are now bolstered by their overconfidence in the Sharkslayer and no longer hiding. Long story short, all the fish are eaten in a violent bloodbath. That was the threat made by our lovable Lenny.
Narration. And this was just a threat, as Lenny doesn't want to go back to the shipwreck after what happened with Frankie.
Now batting for the Southside Sharks, number 15.
Sharks have a baseball league? How does a ball travel very far through water? How do the sharks hold the bats? Why did anyone think a new Firestarter movie was a good idea? I have so many questions.
But if the movie answered those questions, it wouldn't serve a purpose to the main story, so it's not going to be taking time out to explain how baseball leagues work in this world.
Hey, a bed!
Some more bullshit where not only does a shark need a bed, but a shark-sized bed is also available.
So, you want to give an explanation on why you think that?
I'm a vegetarian.
But he's not. Earlier he told his brother he would eat the fish after it died, but he wouldn't kill them. That's not the same as only eating vegetables.
But he just told him he'd do that, which is not the same thing as actually doing it. In addition, there isn't a moment in the film where Lenny actually eats a fish. For the parts when he has Oscar in his mouth and later Angie, he ends up not being able to stand the taste.
What's with the we? I don't want any part of this.
Jack Black's comments after reading the script and before the studio added another 0 to his paycheck somehow make their way into this movie.
Actually, Jack Black had a lot of fun doing this movie because in a behind-the-scenes video for the first Kung Fu Panda, he said this.
I had a voice in an animated feature called Shark Tale, and I had a lot of fun making that.
So basically, Jeremy is denying the passion of the filmmakers and cast, which is one of the worst things you could ever do as a film reviewer.
I would like to pause for a moment during this dramatic fall to remind you that this is all taking place underwater.
And even if this wasn't an animated movie with talking fish and sharks, it is possible for things that are already underwater to fall.
And you tell Don Lame-o that I don't never want to see another shark on this reef again.
This works, at least for longer than it should.
Mate, they just saw Oscar taking Lenny down and didn't realise the two were faking the whole thing. Of course they'd be terrified.
Get your roll credit here, hot off the presses, roll credits here.
But I don't think this should count as a roll credit since the movie's title wasn't said there.
What has gotten into you?
Me?
20,000 leagues under the skip.
Oh, you heartless bastard. Also, Jules Verne is on the phone and he wants you to return his book.
Also, this scene shouldn't be skipped because it begins the setup of Oscar's character arc since, like I said earlier, Angie tells him that she liked him when he was a nobody, and now she sees him as nothing but a fake. And that's what leads him to reflect on his selfishness.
The whale wash has a sign that says whale wash right next to the wash itself, which also has whale wash in large letters at the top of the building.
What's your point?
One piece of signage in that area would have done the trick. This is why Sykes never has any money. He doesn't know how to manage his overhead.
Objection misleading. Sykes already explained why he was down on money. He kept taking loans from Don Lino and giving them to Oscar to try and fund his failing get-rich-quick schemes. We see this from a pile of overdue papers on his desk detailing how much Oscar owes, and the meeting in his office with Oscar explaining that because of him, he's now deep in debt with the mob.
Shark Tale perpetuates the myth that anyone likes caviar, because it's not true. No one actually likes caviar.
You are one strange little man, you know. You scream at Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs for hating on sardines, and Inside Out for its assault on broccoli, and now this?
Not a chance movie. I refuse to search whether or not fish get hemorrhoids.
Yeah, that sounds like a you problem.
And I mentioned this in a comment on your video back in 2022, Jeremy. But yes, fish do get hemorrhoids.
Thinking balloons and a box of generic chocolate will make up for being a total ass. And Oscar already knows that she loves Kelpie cream more than anything, so why isn't he at least making a stop there instead of this bullshit? Oscar.
Oof, someone's in the doghouse tonight.
This works, at least for longer than it should.
Enough now.
Well, I say he's bluffing.
There's no way that Lola is working with Don Lino now, except no one who has ever seen a movie.
But Lola is now working for Don. She wants revenge on Oscar since he dumped her, and that's what led to her making an alliance with him in order to fish nap Angie.
Swiping someone else's regurgitated license plate without their consent.
We cool, right? I mean, like the reef is safe.
Yeah.
We're cool.
Yeah, I get that he's not angry anymore, but sharks are still at the top of this food chain, and they're going to get hungry again, right?
Lenny will find other ways. And besides, they won't be attacking this reef. There are others they could go to.
We won't play the song, but everyone is singing about working at a car wash when they are clearly working at a whale wash.
Yes, and? And basically just taking this opportunity to sin all the puns and pop culture references, and effectively padding the sin count. Thanks for coming along again, mate. And maybe I could end up invading one of yours in the future.
And thanks for inviting me into this video, Cheese, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and have a nice day.
And with all that, court is adjourned. Be sure to leave any more suggestions for CinemaSins sins down below, and I will see you in the next video.